Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Wonderful to have you with us this morning, both in person and online. And whether you are joining us this morning online or in person, let us center ourselves for worship by taking a deep breath together. I didn't share, as I usually do, that I'm the Reverend William Levwood. My pronouns are he and him. I'm affectionately known as Rev Lev. Let's take one more breath together.
Good morning. I'm Sheila Doles. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm happy to be a worship associate today. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home where we inspire each other to live our values. Together, we care in community, grow in spirit, and act for justice. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we're so delighted that you decided to join us today, both in person and online. Welcome.
Come to the land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, they then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
For our chalice lighting, and join in our chalice lighting words, which are from our UU values. Hopefully you can see the screen, but there is a bookmark in your hymnal that also has on the front side with the flower of values the words that we'll say second. So let's recite these together now. Love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to help everyone flourish, honor the web of life, be beloved community, cultivate generosity, celebrate diversity, transform the world with love. So we just sang those words from the prophet Amos, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And you probably recognize some of those words, particularly the ones about righteousness and justice flowing down like a mighty stream, because those are well-known words that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said often. And we're celebrating MLK Day Sunday, as we do every year. It's an important day in our Unitarian Universalist calendar. And last Sunday, I preached about what our UU foundational story might be. And I also talked about the foundational stories of other traditions. And I talked about that promised land, and particularly how the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used that phrase of the promised land as a way of being, as an ideal, as a dream that is ever receding before us, that we never quite get to, because it's always, hopefully, getting better and better for the next generation. So today we'll talk more about how we work to continue that journey towards that promised land. Also, last Sunday, I talked about how in our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we believe that we are co-creating the world, and that it is a good world, but that it needs us to make it good, to make it a place where all can thrive and flourish with dignity. So may we continue to do that work through the stories of our own lives, which we talked about on the first Sunday of this month, because our theme for this month is story. And as we'll come back to next Sunday, I'm really excited we have a handful of congregants who are going to share stories from their own lives. In Unitarian Universalism, we draw from multiple sources, but not only multiple religious sources, and not only science, including psychology and sociology, but we draw from the experiences of our own lives. We see our own lives as sacred texts, as sacred stories. So we had the opportunity to explore that a little bit in my sermon on the first Sunday of this month, and then we'll have an opportunity to be inspired by other people's stories on how we can see our own life journey as a sacred story. So, coming back to today, we're going to talk about that promised land and that dream that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and so many others were co-creating together during the Civil Rights era, and that we've continued to work to co-create since. We're going to sing about that now.
We are dreaming a new way. We are dreaming a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are dreaming a new way.
Thank you, everyone. I forgot to mention that this is a multi-generational service, which we do on every third Sunday. So on every other Sunday of the month, the children and youth would leave the sanctuary and go downstairs for their classes after this story that we're about to hear. But on this Sunday, we all stay together.
First, my name is Michelle Anderson, and I am the Director of Spiritual Development for Children and Youth. So I got to meet a couple new youth today, so I'm glad for that. If I didn't get to meet you yet, then please introduce yourself, and I'd love to meet you. Today, I'm going to share with you a story called We Dream a World, Carrying the Light from My Grandparents, Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. So this story was written by a child, by Yolanda Renee King. It's illustrated by Nicole Tagwell. And this child is the granddaughter of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. But because Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated before she was born, she didn't get to meet him. And so this story, this book, is in tribute to both of her grandparents. Granddaddy and Grandma, you had a dream. We would be judged by what's in our hearts, not by the color of our skin. You were gone before I came into this world, but that dream and so many others lives deep inside of me. Everything you believed in still shines like the brightest sunrise on a golden horizon. Many ask me, do you plan to follow in Dr. King and Coretta Scott King's footsteps? How will you ever fill their shoes? Do you have what it takes to walk their path? I hold fast to all that you stood for: peace, togetherness, harmony, and love. Granddaddy and Grandma, thanks to your wisdom and determination, I now have my own footsteps, my own journey, my own dreams for our world. And so while I follow your example, I'm also ready to lead. I am ready to walk the uncertain road from today to tomorrow. I am ready to keep my eyes on the prize that you set out before us with the power of your vision. Yes, Grandma Coretta. Yes, Granddaddy Martin. I am ready. Every day I thank you for the gifts you gave so many of us through your hard work. Because of you, I know that struggle and triumph are bigger than just me. The promise of a new day starts with me. You helped us see the dream. Now we're here to be the dream. The wisdom of your words weaves a rainbow that lights our way. My parents remind me that in your lives together you shared what came to be called a revolution of values. I'm sorry there are still so many problems to endure. You devoted your lives to making our lives better. And now it's my turn to start a new revolution that values kindness, truth, equality, and service. There are still rocks in the road. I wish you were here so we could walk it together. Because our dreams need the strength of a love so powerful that nothing can stop them or us. We dream a world where school is a safe place, free of fear. No violence spoken here. We dream a world where guns are not games. Shoot for the stars, not at each other. We dream a world where poverty is a memory. Liberty, justice, and food for all. We dream a world where the only walls are those that hold safe spaces and have windows and mirrors that reflect our unity. Beauty has no boundaries. We dream a world where trees, flowers, and the earth's creatures thrive in their right seasons. Spring, summer, winter, fall. Honesty is the warmest climate. Our time has come to bring our twinkle, letting everyone know. Spread the word. Have you heard? All across the nation, we are going to be a great generation. From today to tomorrow, we dream a world. I want to know what you dream, which is why I gave you a bag with a board and a graphic novel strip. What do you dream? What do you want the world to be? Draw it. You can put captions of what people say to each other, or you don't have to do that. You can make your own. So that's why I gave you options and a whole bunch of colors to draw your beautiful world. If you do one, please share it with me after the service. I'd love to see it and what you dream your world to be. Thank you.
May this community continue to be a place where we celebrate our joys together and support each other through our challenging times. With that, I invite you to continue in a spirit of meditation. We sang this 2 months ago. It's the chant, "Please prepare me," because we emphasized in November how important it is at this time to be a sanctuary for others, to be a place where people know that they can be valued, where we're all choosing love and letting people know that we're choosing love. And then I wrote alternate lyrics as well about how we're called to a prophetic love, a revolutionary love.
Love, please make me a revolutionary, filled with fury, bold the call, with compassion we will take take action, seeking justice for all. Lord, please make me a revolutionary, filled with fury, bold the call, with compassion we will take action, seeking justice for all.
This reading is from our gray hymnal. These are the words of Paul Robeson. I shall take my voice wherever those who want to hear the melody of freedom, or the words that might inspire hope and courage in the face of despair and fear. My weapons are peaceful, for it is only by peace that peace can be attained. The song of freedom must prevail.
So there's another minister, UU minister in our larger Soul Matters community, which is where we get our monthly themes from, who had the idea to write a letter to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that really spoke to me. I shared last Sunday that sometimes when I feel like tranquility is just entirely out of my reach, I take solace in the idea that somebody, the Buddha, in my case, I take solace in the idea that the Buddha found a way to enduring peace, even when I can't imagine finding that. And in a similar way, I've been thinking that in this time, when I often feel such a sense of desperation, that when I feel like hope is beyond my reach, that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. believed there was a way forward, even in a time that was actually even more divided than we are today, a time when there was still legal segregation, racial apartheid in much of this nation. And it's also comforting to me, at least, in a different way, to know that Martin Luther King Jr. had moments when he struggled to keep the faith. I didn't know that until recently. We've lifted him up as such an icon that I didn't know that, especially in those last years of his life, he was often struggling to keep the faith, that he was drinking a little too much at times. It's helpful, for me at least, to realize that such a towering figure was human too. That even with his deep faith convictions, he still had moments of doubt, of struggle. So I started my letter to MLK by mentioning my doubts, connecting with him in my imagination on the level of these doubts. I shared with him that much of what he had worked for had worked, that the civil rights movement had made significant and lasting changes. And I'm so grateful to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to the many people in that generation who did that work, and those in following generations who've continued the work. And I know many of us here, some in smaller and some in larger ways, have contributed to that ongoing work. Thank you. And thank you in advance, because I know that even in the face of feelings of fatigue and despair, that we will continue the work. We will continue what Ta-Nehisi Coates calls the beautiful struggle. I also shared in my letter to Martin Luther King Jr. that unfortunately he was right about increased militarism that would see us engaged in 3 wars in my lifetime, that has seen the militarization of police departments across this nation. That's particularly terrifying right now, isn't it? That he was also right about American materialism and growing economic inequality in our nation, with the wealth gap growing exponentially over the past 50 plus years since his death. Like a person composing a prayer, first I started by trying to make an empathic connection, and then by sharing my humble gratitude. And next, as you may already know, comes the ask, the request, the sometimes near desperate begging for help. So next in my letter, I wrote, please, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., with your deep wisdom, please help us, share some of that wisdom with us. And I let the MLK within answer. And I wrote another letter, a letter from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It goes something like this. Dear Reverend William Levwood, the answers were never easy. The road has always been long. What I found useful in my life was to have core convictions, to reflect deeply, to find out which things to place at the center, and to let those commitments guide me, no matter what. And then, with those commitments at the center, to look to the moment, to ask, how can I apply those commitments to this moment in time in a way that will have a direct and meaningful impact on people's lives right here, right now? That action changed from moment to moment. It was a bus boycott in Montgomery. It was a march from Selma. It was protesting the Vietnam War. It was showing up with the sanitation workers in Memphis. It was the poor people's movement, building a multiracial coalition from the industrial centers of the North to the mountains of Appalachia to the fields of the South. Always, always there was coalition building with those we could make coalition with. Always there was steadfast opposition to injustice and those who sold their souls to the devil. For me, the core commitments were a commitment to an all-embracing agape love and to the method of nonviolence, so that we, in our movement, opposed injustice while always leaving the door open for hate to be transformed, for people's hearts to be transformed. But we remain committed to the needed changes, whether other people's hearts were transformed or not. Love means speaking truth to power. Love means giving power the option to change. Love means using our own power without apology, without reservation, to oppose injustice whenever and wherever we see it. There was strategy involved, but that strategy had to remain flexible. Stay true to the core commitments, but then be flexible enough to adapt to the moment. And I can see how that might seem harder to do in your time, but it's always been hard. I had to be willing to be unpopular. As respectable as I was, I had to be willing to be seen as not respectable. And those who journeyed with me had to be willing to be unpopular too. Worse than just unpopular, at one point I was called the most dangerous man in America. I understand that I'm revered now, but I had to stay the course in the face of the most vile hatred. Hatred that you know now cost me my life. My deep faith, my Christianity helped me persevere. Jesus warned us in the Sermon on the Mount to be ready to be persecuted for our prophetic faith, for standing up to imperial power. I had a deep and abiding Christian faith. I was steeped in a tradition of surviving and thriving against all odds, of making a way where there was no way, looking beyond my lifetime, as so many as my ancestors had done for generations before me, looking beyond my lifetime to make life better for the generations to come. You need to ground yourself in this way, to center yourself in your deepest convictions. Ask yourself, what keeps you going when times are hard? What music, what art, what stories? Center down into those sources now and do it together in community. Care in community. Grow in spirit together. Act for justice together. Sing together, make art together, tell stories to each other, listen to each other's stories. Center yourselves in your core convictions. Center yourselves in love, in the power of love that holds humanity together, in a liberating love that transforms the world. And remember, the changes we were able to make in my time, they didn't happen all in one fell swoop. We were looking for the time to take action. We were discovering what methods would bring the change we were committed to bringing, and each action was different. Each action was tailored to the needs of the moment. We had a bus boycott in Montgomery because that was the action that would bring change. We marched from Selma to Montgomery and called allies to join us when that was the action that would bring the needed change. We marched on Washington when we built up our movement and thought a national action would be effective. Now I realized, and you've likely noticed already, that this letter from MLK isn't in his voice, at least not entirely. It's in my voice. I even had MLK quoting our mission statement and our UU values, because this isn't really a letter from MLK, it's a letter from the Martin Luther King Jr. that lives within. And perhaps that's as it should be. As King's granddaughter, Yolanda Renee King, emphasized in today's story, it's our dream now. It's our responsibility now. And with that, I want to give today's message with just one more example from my own life. I've found that there are two ways to make art of any kind. One way is to have a dream, a vision of a work of art, and then try to make it exactly the way that I envisioned it in my mind. Now, I've found that that way doesn't work as well for me. Maybe for someone who has greater artistic skills in whatever medium it would work, but I think there's always a gap between what we envision and reality. And I found that when I just try to force the vision in some idealized way, I end up with a better description than the actual work of art. So the second way is to start with that vision, but then to work with the materials at hand. In our case, if we're taking action for justice, those materials are our own skills and the skills and talents of those around us. Those materials are the context of the moment, which is going to show us a different way to make the dream a reality in each moment, a different step along the journey in each moment. So I invite us to center ourselves in our deepest values, center ourselves in that uplifting, hopeful story, that dream, and then to make the art, to make the movement that we can make in each moment. And then to regroup and make the next art, and then to regroup and make the next action in the movement again and again and again. May it be so, and may we be among those who continue to make it so.
Love will guide us through the hard night.
Thank you. You may be seated. I sometimes want to end that song on the second verse because it says we can change the world with our love. But today it feels just right to say that love will guide us through the hard night.
Please rise now in body or in spirit and join in our closing words. We'll be doing the slightly adapted version. This church is dedicated to the proposition that by celebrating our differences and embracing our diversity, we honor the unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity. Now that we've gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out into the world nourished, rejuvenated, and inspired to share our values. Thank you.